Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the Sublime One, the Worthy One, the Fully Enlightened One. So, I was thinking about topics, and I thought that I wanted to talk about something that I don't think I've talked about as a topic yet. And that is dukkha. It's one of my favorite Pali words to say. For those of you not familiar in the Theravada, the ancient language used is in the suttas, in the ancient scriptures is Pali. In the Mahayana, the ancient language used in the scriptures is Sanskrit. And I believe this is one of those words that it's the same for both. Dukkha. It's just interesting to say it. I like to say it. But I don't like what it is. And neither do any of us. This is the first noble truth. This is dukkha is what you might often be here translating as suffering. Now, I don't necessarily like that term. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I think I thought my headset might be going out. Okay. So, if you're when you come to Buddhism and you hear the Four Noble Truths, right? What are the Four Noble Truths? The first noble truth is life is suffering. And then you say, what? I don't like that. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's good stuff in life too, right? Well, and people say the Buddha said life is suffering. Well, I'm here to say that that is not what he said, actually. What he said was that there is dukkha. The first noble truth is the noble truth of dukkha. So what exactly is dukkha? Because there's a lot of words in here, I'm going to post the definition in the chat. Now, this first definition is what is seen in the ancient texts. And I'm going to read it. Birth is dukkha. Aging is dukkha. Death is dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. So we kind of understand that. If we're reading that, like, yeah, all that stuff kind of sucks. So yeah, it makes sense that that would be suffering. But then we look, association with the unbeloved is dukkha. And then we say, okay, well, what that means is things and people and places and thoughts that come to us that we don't like, that we don't want to have anything to do with, and they come to us. That's dukkha. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Separation from the loved is dukkha. Meaning that those things, those people, places, thoughts, things that we like, when we separate from them, there's dukkha. Not getting what is wanted. Of course, we're all probably very familiar with that as human beings. Going back to our earliest days when we didn't get that toy or whatever we wanted and we screamed. We still do it today as adults sometimes. In short, the five clinging aggregates. So that's the definition as told by the Buddha back in the day, when he was teaching. So when we try to kind of come up with a one English word translation of this, suffering doesn't quite fit, because there are things in life that are dukkha, but don't necessarily um, fit with our English Western concept of suffering. And every time I do my Basics of Buddhism class and we go over dukkha, I always like to post this, because this is when we talk about there being one word. You might also hear dukkha other than suffering. You might also hear it translated as stress, which is a pretty good word. I think it's better than suffering. Um, but you also might hear it as dissatisfaction or unsatisfactory, which personally I like. But it's good to not necessarily attach too much to one word. Well, I'm going to post here the contemporary. It's called a contemporary definition of dukkha. And I think this covers pretty much all of it. Dukkha is disturbance, irritation, dejection, worry, fear, despair, fear, dread, anguish, anxiety, vulnerability, injury, inability, inferiority, sickness, aging, decay of body and faculties, senility, pain. Okay, so we can kind of understand, right? That okay, all that stuff is kind of sucky. But then now this pleasure. Well, how the heck is pleasure dukkha? Excitement. How the heck is excitement dukkha? That doesn't sound dukkha-ish. That doesn't sound like suffering or unsatisfactory. Boredom. Of course we know, yeah, that's boredom is crappy. We don't like boredom. We gotta do something. Deprivation. Excess. How can we have dukkha if we have an excess of things? An excessive money. So we don't have to worry about being poor. How do we have dukkha even then? Desire, frustration, suppression, longing, aimlessness, hope. How is hope dukkha? That's interesting, right? Hopelessness, effort, activity, striving, repression, loss, want, insufficiency, satiety, love. How is love dukkha? How is love suffering? Lovelessness, friendlessness, dislike, aversion, attraction, parenthood, childlessness. So wait, having children and not having children is dukkha? Submission, rebellion, decision, indecisiveness, vacillation, uncertainty. Now that is a contemporary definition of dukkha. And that can get people who think of dukkha as suffering, that can get really confusing, right? How is pleasure, excitement, how are what we consider good things in life to be dukkha? We might better understand that by going through the at least to the second noble the second noble truth, which is the cause of dukkha. The cause of dukkha being clinging, craving. Clinging and craving have to do with likes and dislikes, which is really attachment and aversion. When our senses make contact with something, whether it's another person, a sound, a thought, whatever it is, we automatically make a judgment. I like this or I don't like this. And when we like it, we want more of it. And when we don't like it, we don't want to have anything to do with it. We want no more of it. So when we have these things that come into our lives and we make these decisions, we make these judgments, this is the first step in how even what we consider to be happiness in our life, what we consider to be quote unquote good things, are still dukkha. Now, when we talk about dukkha, we're not necessarily saying that things that have dukkha or cause dukkha or are connected to dukkha are bad. There's no such thing as thou shalt not or this is bad or that's bad necessarily in Buddhism. There is skillful action and unskillful action. So, how can something like, I don't know, something exciting like skydiving, how can skydiving be dukkha? That brings excitement, right? Adrenaline, exhilaration. And what can we do to things that bring these excitements and adrenalines and accelerations? We like it. We get attached to it. And because everything that is in existence is impermanent, meaning that it is always changing. Whatever we like and attach to, it will change. And if we are too attached to it, when it changes, that causes us to suffer. Dukkha is not this magical thing or this state of the world kind of thing. Dukkha is really all about how we view the world through our own mindset, through our own perception, our own consciousness. And it is precisely because dukkha relies in us, dukkha exists in us, dukkha is because of us, it's precisely because of that that we have the ability to change that. To find what the Buddha called true, unchanging, unalienable happiness that is not based on anything that changes, not based on anything that's impermanent that we cling to, but happiness that is there because we are not clinging to things. So because when we are not clinging, there's no dukkha. It's all in the mind. Now, when we talk about craving or clinging, it doesn't always just mean something that we like and we want more of it. Craving is also part of that aversion as well. We crave to be away from that person that annoys us at work. We don't want to have anything to do with them. We try to run from them. That's craving. We crave, we don't want to go to the gym. Or we don't want to do whatever we don't like. And so we go out of our way to try to avoid it at all costs, even to our detriment. That's clinging. That's craving. That's dukkha. When we save up our money, we get a car that we like, and it's a fancy fast car, like I don't know, whatever, a Lamborghini or whatever. And we have this car, and we cherish it, and it's our favorite thing, and we love it. And then what happens? It's parked. You park at I don't know, a restaurant, and you go in, and you come out, and the thing is totaled because somebody crashed into it. What happens? We can't believe that this happened. How could this happen? And then it jumps to, who did this? And then the anger comes in. Why did they do this? And you want to beat the crap out of them or whatever. And you want justice. You want something to be done because this thing that you loved, that you cherished, that you wanted so bad is now gone. And it's done. There's a great story Ajahn Brahm told about a disciple of his, how he parked his cherished motorcycle in a garage, and he went and he, in the city, and he went and he did what he needed to do, and he came back and he went to the spot and it wasn't there. And he talks about how all what I just described started coming up in his mind, and because he was a disciple, because he practiced this being able to let go, he caught himself and he said, you know what? Okay, whoever took it, they probably need it more than me. They can have it. And then, of course, what happened was he realized he was on the wrong level. And he's like, oh, good, my bike. It's not gone. It's there. So this is the kind of stuff that happens when you're able to let go. And it's because we're not able to let go that we have dukkha. And I mean, I'll use an example, a very, very hard example, and it's not an easy black or white thing. The hardest example of this, and when we talk about loss, when we talk about separation from the beloved, is losing a loved one, losing a parent or a sibling or a spouse or a child. And it's kind of like a misconception. People always say, and I hear it asked all the time, well, Buddha says we're supposed to detach and not have any attachments. How do I detach from my spouse? Or how do I, not have any attachments towards my parents or this or that? And again, it's a little bit of a misconception. I'll give an example of myself. I am hopefully in the near future going to be going into the monastery to become a monk. And if I become a monk, and if I become a monk for life, I will have been pretty detached, but because I was born in this world by a mother and a father, and I have siblings, no matter how long, unless maybe I become a stream winner or an enlightened or whatever, no matter how long that happens, no matter how long I'm a monk, when they die, I will suffer because of that, because I have this attachment as being a human born in the world. And there's not anything necessarily wrong with that. It's just because we have attachments, because we love this person, because we have this person in our life, if they go away in one form or another, we will have suffering. We will have dukkha because of that. So even though I'm done with I don't want to be married again or anything like that. I was married a long time ago, and my wife actually died of cancer a long time ago. That was one of many deaths in my life that I think has led me to kind of realize, yeah, there's a lot of dukkha in this world. And there's a way to get past that. There's a way out of this suffering. And that way is the third noble truth. Or that the ability is the third noble truth, being nibbana or nirvana. And the fourth noble truth being the way from dukkha to nirvana, the Noble Eightfold Path. So really the whole teaching of the Buddha is dukkha. And you have that famous phrase of his, then as now, I have only taught dukkha and the cessation of dukkha. That was the summation of his teaching. Things that are exciting, things that we find pleasurable, things that we think bring us happiness, change. And because we are not accepting of that change, we experience dukkha. You're with somebody, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, for many years, and you think everything's going great, and then all of a sudden they want a divorce, or they find somebody else and they're gone. We're done. And you're like, holy crap! I thought we had all this great stuff, and we loved each other, and this and that, but things changed. And you can choose how you want to act in a situation like that. You can move towards letting go, or you can try to cling on to what's not there anymore, causing further suffering, causing further dukkha. Either way, you're going to have dukkha, but one way is a much shorter path, and the other way can go as long as you want it. I remember another Ajahn Brahm story that I always loved was he was talking about that we don't have to grieve, that we don't have to be attached to our grief at this conference. And this woman came up to him after and said, was angry at him. And she had, I guess, lost her husband or whatever. And she said, she was telling him, don't take away my grief. You can't take away my grief, this or that. And I guess it's because it had become part of her personality that she would go to all of these support groups and all of these things, and her personality was the widower. She attached to that personality and to that grief, and she wouldn't let it go. Whereas in my experience, for a couple different reasons, I wasn't a Buddhist yet when I was with my wife, but I was on the path towards that. I had already started meditating and learning, and it was kind of like my intuition, the little training I had, and I knew that my wife wouldn't want me to be attached and to grieving and to, like you ever see in the movies, right? When they like one of those romantic comedies, or well, I guess if somebody dies, it's not a comedy, but those horribly sappy romantic movies that I used to get dragged to, and like the one like the spouse dies or whatever, and they're like, I'll never love again. And then they like, they go in their room and like they're under the covers and in a depression for like months on end and they don't leave or anything like that. That's attaching to your grief. Grief, if you lose a parent or a loved one, grief is going to happen. Suffering's, dukkha is going to happen. But what you can choose to do is you can choose to allow it to come and not attach to it and go through the grieving process. And then when it's ready to go, you can let it go. And that's really what dukkha is kind of about in terms of the power that we have to lessen it in our lives until that day that we, hopefully are awakened, enlightened, and then there is no more dukkha. Because we have radically changed our mindset of existence, accepting of what happens, no more clinging, no more craving, and no more trying to change the world when we can't. No more Ajahn Brahm. I'm using him a lot tonight, but that's because I've seen so much of his stuff that I can pretty much use him in any talk that I do. But he uses a great quote, and it's suffering, dukkha, is expecting from the world what it can never give you. And the first time I heard that, I said, wow, yeah, that's pretty true. What do we want, right? We want always to be happy. We want always to be with our loved ones in happiness forever. And that not to change. What does that sound like? Sounds like heaven, doesn't it? So we want this heaven on earth, that nothing changes and everything's great and we all live happily ever after. But the world can't give us that. No matter how long you could be married 60 years, eventually both of you will die. You can, whatever pleasures, whatever happiness you think that you have, when it changes, if we're not accepting of that change, that's dukkha. That is suffering. And going back to the term unsatisfactoriness, the reason I like that term is because the more you experience dukkha, the more an unsatisfactory feeling arises in you. A dissatisfaction, a disenchantment of all of the things that everybody considers to be good things in life. And that dissatisfaction is this, even when you think that you have everything that society says is what you should have, it's the best thing you should have, there's still this nagging feeling that doesn't quite fit the bill. I mean, it doesn't work anymore. If I did that again, it would just be going into the same cycle of dukkha. I think that's where I am in my life, where right now I have the best job I've ever had. I'm in the best shape and the best looking I've ever had. So if I wanted to date and find a girlfriend and get married and all that, I could definitely do that. Everything in my life is great. There are people who would love to have what I have in my life. But yet, I want to give it all up and become a monk. That's why people are like, what? Nobody understands why I would want to do that. And the reason why is because of dukkha. I've seen it enough. I've understood it. I've experienced it. And when I started meditating and started down this Buddhist path, I had no idea that I would be where I am today. I wanted to meditate and to practice because it felt right. It fit me. And it's amazing where it's taken me. And it's amazing to me so far how much the Buddha, what he said was right. I can't verify everything he said yet because I'm certainly not an arahant. I'm not enlightened at all. Um, I wouldn't even say I'm extremely advanced. You know, there's still a lot of meditation and a lot of practice for me to go. Um, you know, and hopefully not too many more lifetimes if it is a reality that we are reborn. But at this point, renouncing what everything that people think is the greatest thing seems to me to be the most logical and desired aspect. And it's hard to explain because most people can't understand it or they don't want to because this is what society says is what I should have or what I should do to be happy. Yeah, most people say, oh yeah, society says that we need to be rich to be happy. And I don't necessarily think that society really says that, per se. I mean, it depends on where you look, I guess. But even with just a modest, the house, the cars, modest everything, you have everything, the dissatisfaction is there for some. And it just doesn't work out. It's kind of like in the 60s, they had like that whole movement, the Wanderers, what was it, Jack Kerouac or whatever, them wandering around and all that stuff. Well, ironically enough, at the same time they were doing that in America, in Thailand you had wandering monks in the forest, following the path of the Dhamma, wandering alone in the forests, in the jungles, and practicing. So it's not a unique or a new phenomena to have this dissatisfaction. I think that it's one of those things where when you've experienced enough dukkha and you see it enough, you understand it, you have that experiential wisdom about it, things don't have that same luster anymore that they used to. They don't have the same attachment, so you're not running after these things. And that also kind of allows you to, when you do have something good in your life, you appreciate it more because you know that it can go at any moment. Things can change at any moment. So while I have this person in my life, while I have this experience in my life, let me be there with it, with them, and enjoy and have a good experience and know that eventually it will change. And we have the choice how we react to that change. In the beginning of your practice, it doesn't seem like you do. Or even just in normal life, it doesn't seem like you do. You feel like you're being swept along by the current. And everything is happening and you have no control over it. And pretty much you don't. You rarely have control over what happens to you in your life. But what you do have control of is how you react to that. And every little bit of action that you take that is away from attachment and aversion and clinging and craving is that little bit less dukkha in your life. And this is something that comes naturally with practice. And when I talk about the practice, meaning the Buddhist practice, what the Buddha taught as the practice, the Noble Eightfold Path and such, it's not just sitting on a cushion and meditating. That's part of it. Developing generosity, dana. When you're able to give things away, and you start small, and you start getting, give more and more and more, that opens the heart, that opens compassion, that lessens the ego, lessens attachment. And the Buddha also used this as the first step in the process. The second step being sila, or morality. And we know that morality in Buddhism is not like Christianity, like thou shalt not, you do this or you go to hell, these kind of things. That doesn't exist in Buddhism. Morality is every day, in every way, in every action, attempting to perform skillful actions of thought, word, and deed that are beneficial to yourself and others, that lead to a better life for yourself and others. And we're going to screw up. We're human. But the Buddha says the best chance of practice is as a human. So we are in this human life. We have the ability to practice. And we should do it. Because there is dukkha. And there's that one phrase where it says, get up, stand up, what's your need for sleep? And now this is from the suttas, this isn't Bob Marley. Get up, stand up. But that is the way it's translated. Get up, stand up, what's your need for sleep? There is no rest for those afflicted by the fires of craving. Over there, a forest. Over there, the base of a tree. Over there, an abandoned building. Practice diligently. So that's the Buddha's message. That there is dukkha in this life. Not that life is dukkha, because it isn't. Yes, there are happy times in life, but even those happy times and even those happy experiences are subject to change. And because they are subject to change, when we cling to them and we experience the loss of them, we will have dukkha. But when we are to the point where we are no longer clinging and craving, then there will be no more dukkha. Of course, that happens when we are awakened. That's none of us here, I don't think. We're all just human beings trying to find our path in this world. And for me, the Buddhist path has been the most right, the most logical, and feels the most home for me. And it took me many years to practice this. I was raised Catholic, but I disavowed being a Catholic when I was 16. And from 16 to 30, I consider myself nothing. I looked into, and I liked human culture and religions, and I um, educated myself on a lot of different religions. But it wasn't until really starting to learn Buddhism, and specifically my Theravada Buddhism for me, is what clicked for me, and is what made made me feel at home, like my worldview. All these years I've been searching for something, and here it is. So for me, the noble truth of dukkha, in my experiences, not only with the death of my wife, but I've experienced many deaths in my life, and I've experienced loss other than death as well. So when you have these experiences, it's easier to get disenchanted. Like, I laugh at, people who go into their 50s and they haven't lost anybody. Like their grandparents are still alive. I was like, their grandparents are still alive. What they must be, like 100 plus. And yeah, they are. They're 100. But yeah, I couldn't imagine. It's almost like living the life of the Buddha in the beginning, right? Where the father hid him away from old age, sickness, and death. I couldn't imagine living a life where everybody's with me until we're all very, very old. And then I guess everybody dies of old age. That's interesting. Well, I wish lots of happiness on those that have that. But I'm sure it's pretty rare. All of us, you get to my age, 35, all of us have had some kind of experience and loss. Whether it's a person or something else. Your house burning down or something horrible like that. But these are the things in life that we connect with dukkha. And these are the things in life that we have no control over them happening, but we have control always over how we react and what we do with what is given to us. The old phrase, doing what we can with the hands that were dealt. I don't know if any of you play poker, but I've played a good amount in my day with friends and co-workers and stuff like that. And it always amazes me how there's some people that can have the crappiest hand, yet they end up winning all our money. How does that happen? Well, you know what? They're able to take a horrible hand and they know what to do with it and end up, reaching the heights in the end. So it's all in how you react and how you choose to take what happens. So that we chip away at that iceberg named dukkha. And eventually, after many, many lifetimes, it's done. There's no more. And then peace. True lasting peace of nibbana or nirvana. So I yammered on for about 45 minutes about dukkha. So unless we can move to the question and answer or discussion part of this. If you'd like to discuss something, if you'd like to talk about dukkha, if you'd like to ask a question, I can't guarantee an answer, but we can always discuss that. Welcome, Celeste. And if there is no further questions or comments or need for discussion, then we can end early. Whatever works. I'm not clinging to either one.
Are we at the end already?
Yes, we are. We're at the end.
My computer broke down. I spent all day trying to get it back up, and when I did, I found out my Wi-Fi network was broken. I spent about 3 hours on the phone trying to get it back up, and I'm just sitting here thinking, oh boy, I'm not attached, am I?
Oh, I've had plenty of attachments to my internet connection too. That's a tough one. But I've been recording these. I used to record almost all the talks, but I got out of practice of it. So I'm recording them, and they'll be up on my blog. I think you have my blog link, don't you, Celeste, or no?
No.
Okay. It's a really hard one to remember. My name at tumblr.com. So, very easy. Yes, I saw people, the few people who know I'm, a Buddhist in my real life, they, every time they see something like that, email, as long as there's no attachments, little comic, they always post stuff on my, on my page. I've seen that one more times than I can count. Okay, friends. So we will end here then for tonight. Thank you for coming and listening and participating in Dhamma. Good to see all of you. And until next time, Suki Hantu, may you be happy and may your practice flourish.